We all have that person in our lives who rejects the official media in favor of, for lack of a better word, conspiracy theory. Maybe you're that person. These are people who believe groups secretly manipulate world events while ordinary people remain unaware. Most of us have often unkind explanations for why people might believe conspiracy theories. They're just gullible, they're uneducated, they're irrational. But here's the problem. Research consistently shows that the psychology behind conspiracy beliefs is far more complicated than a simple explanation. In fact, many people who believe conspiracy theories are highly curious and highly intelligent. They're skeptical of authority, they spend hours researching, they ask difficult questions. These aren't bad qualities by any stretch of the imagination. History has shown that governments sometimes lie. Corporations sometimes hide the truth. Real conspiracies have happened. The Watergate scandal was once dismissed as impossible. The Tuskegee syphilis study revealed that the US government knowingly deceived participants for decades. The tobacco industry spent years concealing evidence about the dangers of smoking. So the question isn't whether conspiracies exist, because they do, they have. The real question is, why are some people more likely to see a conspiracy where none exists? To answer this, we have to stop the judgmental characterization of people who believe conspiracy theories as lacking intelligence, being gullible. Instead, we have to think about them as far more human and far more central to our survival. Let's go back a bit in history. Our brains were built to see patterns. There is an evolutionary perspective why this was helpful. Imagine you're walking in the forest 3,000 years ago and you hear a rustle. It could be the bushes, it could be just the wind, or it could be something far more dangerous, a predator, say. If you ignore the sound and you were wrong, you didn't survive. On the other hand, if you assumed it was dangerous and you were wrong, fine, you wasted a bit of time and anxiety, but you were more likely to survive. For our ancestors, making too many false alarms was far less costly than missing a real threat. Over thousands of generations, evolution favored brains that were exceptionally good at detecting patterns, sometimes too good. Psychologist and science writer Michael Sherner coined the term patternicity to describe our tendency to find meaningful patterns in random information. You see this everywhere. People find faces in clouds and rock formations, hidden messages in songs played backwards. Most of the time, pattern recognition is one of humanity's greatest strengths. Without it, there'd be no science, no language, no maths, no technology. Our entire civilization depends on connecting dots. But sometimes our brain connects dots that were never connected in the first place. Psychologists call this apophonia. It's the tendency to perceive relationship between unrelated events. Imagine two celebrities die in a week. Objectively, these events may have nothing to do with each other, but our brains don't like random events. They instinctively begin asking, what if they're connected? Because random events feel incomplete. Stories feel satisfying. But pattern recognition isn't the whole story. There is another psychological mechanism that's arguably more powerful. It is called hyperactive agency detective. The idea is simple. Our brains don't just look for patterns, they look for people behind those patterns. Imagine hearing footsteps at night. Your first instinct isn't to wonder whether the sound emerged from a complex interaction between the wind, loose gravel, and shifting temperatures. No. You immediately assume somebody's there. Our brains have evolved to detect intentional agents because, once again, the cost of missing was enormous. Better to think a predator was hiding nearby than fail to notice that one actually is. This tendency served our ancestors well, but modern life presents problems that our brains will never evolve to handle. Things like financial crisis or global pandemic, international politics, artificial intelligence. These aren't events caused by a single hunter hiding behind a tree. They're incredibly complicated systems involving millions of independent decisions, chance, feedback loops, and unintended consequences. Yet our brains instinctively asks, who's behind this? Who's pulling all the strings? This question feels natural because that's how our minds have evolved. When something enormous happens, it's psychologically easier to imagine a mastermind than to accept countless unrelated decisions that actually created massive consequences and that nobody really knows what they're doing. Think about any show from Powerpuff Girls to Harry Potter. There's always a mastermind behind it, and that makes it far more simple and easy to diagnose and eliminate the problem. It's why conspiracy theories often describe secret organizations with extraordinary levels of coordination. The human mind is uncomfortable with the possibility that no single person is actually in control, and that discomfort becomes even stronger when the world feels uncertain. Sometimes believing in conspiracy isn't about evidence at all. In fact, sometimes it's about control. There is a common assumption that conspiracy theories spread because people don't have enough information. But psychologists have found that information is only part of the story. Sometimes what's driving the belief isn't lack of facts, it's a need. Imagine you lost your job, inflation is rising, your savings are shrinking, AI is taking over. Every news headline seems more alarming than the last. You ask different experts what's happening and you get 5 different answers. Suddenly the world feels so unpredictable. And human beings are exceptionally uncomfortable with unpredictability. Psychologists call this the need for cognitive closure. It's exactly what it sounds like. Our desire for clear, definite answers instead of uncertainty. Some people have a stronger need for closure than others, but everybody experiences it to some degree. Think about how often you've Googled the ending of a TV show because you couldn't stand not knowing what happened, or because once you've watched it, you still didn't understand. Our brains crave resolution. Now imagine our brains trying to apply the same instinct to something much bigger: a pandemic, a terrorist attack, an economic collapse, a war. These events generate an overwhelming number of unanswered questions. Why did this happen? Could we have predicted it? Who's responsible? And perhaps the hardest question of it all: could it happen again? Am I safe? The truth is that reality often doesn't provide satisfying answers. Sometimes no single person is responsible. Sometimes experts genuinely disagree. Sometimes they get it wrong. Sometimes history changes because of thousands of tiny decisions that nobody intended. Psychologically, that's just far too difficult to accept, because uncertainty isn't just uncomfortable, it feels unsafe. This leads me to compensatory control theory. This theory suggests that when people lose sense of personal control, they become more likely to believe that somebody else is controlling events. At first that sounds kind of strange. Why would believing a secret organization is pulling the strings make you feel better? Because there's something more scary than an evil plan. It's no plan at all. If a financial crisis happened because millions of people made independent decisions that accidentally interacted in disastrous ways, that's kind of terrifying. It suggests the world is fragile, complex, unpredictable. But if the crisis happened because a powerful group deliberately engineered it, suddenly the chaos has shape. There are villains, there's intention, there's a story. It neatly ties in with the stories that you heard growing up. Oddly enough, believing somebody's in control can actually feel psychologically easier than believing nobody is. This doesn't mean conspiracy theories are comforting. Many are frightening. But psychologically, intentional evil can be easier to understand and make sense of than just random chaos. Our brains prefers a world with authors, even if we don't like what they've written. Now imagine some of the most significant events in global history. A president is assassinated, the skyscrapers collapse, a global pandemic begins, the entire economy crashes. Events this enormous can seem that they have equally enormous explanations. And that's exactly what our intuition tells us. Psychologists call this proportionality bias. It's our tendency to believe that major events must have major causes. The bigger the outcome, the bigger we expect the explanation to be. If a child accidentally knocks over a glass of milk, that's easy to accept. But if an entire civilization changes course because of one mistake, our intuition resists it. History, however, doesn't always work that way. Sometimes a single misunderstanding does start a war. Sometimes our scientific breakthrough transforms the world. Sometimes one person, one event, one tiny mistake changes history. And sometimes countless unrelated events simply collide. Reality doesn't care whether explanations feel emotionally satisfying, but our brains do. That's why conspiracy theories often grow around events that are historically significant. The more emotionally important the event feels, the harder it is to accept an ordinary, simple, pedestrian explanation. It's almost as if our minds say, something this big could not possibly have happened by accident, even when history reportedly tells us it can. Up to this point, we've mainly talked about how people process information, but eventually conspiracy theories stop being about information and they become about identity. Imagine you've spent months searching about a controversial topic and you've watched hundreds of videos, read dozens of articles, joined online communities and started talking with friends. Over time, something subtle happens. You're no longer evaluating an idea, you're becoming part of the group. Social psychologists have studied this for decades. It's known as the in-group and out-group bias. Once we identify it with a group, we can actually begin trusting people inside the group than people outside of it. Think of cults that believe that the world is going to end at a certain day. Information from our side feels more credible. Information from outsiders becomes easier to dismiss. This is by no means unique to conspiracy theories. It happens in politics, sports, religion, you name it. But conspiracy communities often create an exceptionally powerful sense of belonging because the members of them believe they possess knowledge that most people don't or are too blind to see. They're not just informed, they're awake. Everybody else is asleep. Now disagreement isn't simply disagreement. It's evidence that somebody just hasn't seen the truth. And once a belief becomes part of your identity, changing your mind becomes much harder. Psychologists call this identity protective cognition. The idea is that people often reject evidence not because it's weak, but because accepting it would threaten our social identity. Changing your opinion could mean losing your community, your friendships, the people that you know, sometimes even your family. That's a high price to pay. There's another very important reason why facts alone rarely change people's minds. This explains why arguments or political debates often don't end up changing people's opinions. Most people are familiar with confirmation bias. We naturally notice evidence that confirms our belief while overlooking evidence that contradicts it. Everybody does this, but researchers think something's much stronger at play here. It's called motivated reasoning. Instead of asking, what conclusion does the evidence support, our brains often ask, what conclusion do I want to be true? Then, without realizing it, we search for evidence that gets us there. The reasoning follows the conclusion, not the other way around. It's important to recognize that this isn't a flaw unique to conspiracy theories by any means. Scientists can fall into motivated reasoning. Journalists, politicians, you and I can. It's a feature of being human. The difference is when somebody's identity becomes deeply connected to a conspiracy theory, motivated reasoning has much higher stakes. Evidence isn't about simply challenging the idea. It's about challenging the person's worldview. And that's one of the hardest things somebody can do. So far, we've talked about pattern recognition, our discomfort with uncertainty, our desire for control, and the role that identity plays in shaping belief. The question is why sometimes they combine to produce conspiracy beliefs. Can all these ideas be unified? According to one of the leading researchers in the field, the answer is yes. Social psychologist Karen Douglas has spent years researching why people believe conspiracy theories. Along with her colleagues, she argues that the beliefs often satisfy three broad psychological needs. The first is epistemic motives, the need to understand. These are our psychological needs related to knowledge and understanding. Human beings don't like unanswered questions. Imagine someone asks you a riddle but refuses to tell you the answer. You'll probably be thinking about it long after conversation ends. I know that when I'm watching a TV show and I recognize the actor but I can't place them, it's bothering me until I go and Google it. Our brains naturally seek explanation. Conspiracy theories provide those explanations, often complete ones. They connect unrelated events into a single coherent story. They identify heroes, villains, motives, hidden agendas. It's a full story. And our brains often mistake coherence for truth. The second reason is existential motives, the need for safety. These relate to our need to feel secure and in control. Think back to the compensatory control theory. When life feels unstable and institutions feel unreliable, people naturally search for explanations that restore our sense of order. Conspiracy theories do exactly that. Ironically, they can make the world feel more predictable, because if somebody is pulling the strings, at least there's order and logic to it. Compare that to believing that the financial markets and viruses and natural disasters emerges from unrelated things that nobody truly fully understands. That's messy. While the messiness is closer to how reality actually works, the human mind doesn't like the mess. Third reason, social motives, the need to belong. Humans are social creatures. We don't just want to understand the world, we want to understand it together. Belonging has always been one of the greatest survival tools. For most of human history, being rejected by your clan meant death. It was dangerous. Today, online communities satisfy the same primal urge. Many conspiracy communities don't just share information, they offer friendship, recognition, understanding, purpose, identity. Members often describe feeling that they've finally found people who understand. Because once a belief becomes woven into your social world, letting go of it could feel like losing part of yourself. This is one reason why changing someone's mind is so difficult. It's rarely about changing an opinion. If conspiracy theories satisfy psychological needs, then arguing with facts alone is often like treating the symptom instead of the cause. Ridicule can unintentionally reinforce the very identity the belief is built upon. This is why public debates sometimes make conspiracies even stronger. The discussion stops being about evidence, but about loyalty, trust, and confirmation bias. If the goal is to persuade somebody to stop believing in their conspiracy theory, you must understand the function that they serve, rather than just arguing the fact. Perhaps the biggest lesson from all this is understanding that skepticism isn't the problem. In fact, skepticism is one of the foundations of science. Scientists question assumptions. Journalists investigate claims. Historians challenge accepted narratives. This is healthy. But instead of thinking, what does the evidence actually show, conspiracy theories often ask a different question. What are they hiding? They sound similar, but psychologically they're very different. One begins with curiosity. The other one begins with certainty. Real skepticism is willing to change its mind. It follows evidence wherever it may lead, even if it's not what you originally thought. Whereas conspiracy theories often work in reverse. The conclusion comes first, the evidence is collected afterwards to prove the conclusion. That's motivated reasoning in action. And that's something every human being, not just conspiracy theories, are subject to. We all have to guard against that. I hope this helps you understand why smart people can believe in conspiracy theories. They're not unintelligent or incapable of critical thought. And it's not because they haven't fact-checked. The answer is more uncomfortable than that. Conspiracy theories take advantage of psychological systems that exist in every single one of us. The same mindset that helps us recognize faces and see patterns that aren't there. The same mindset that encourages healthy skepticism becomes chronic distrust. The same desire for community that helps build friendships also makes it difficult to question the beliefs in our own group. These aren't flaws in psychology. These are trade-offs. Evolution didn't design our brains to discover objective truth. It designed them to survive. Most of the time, these goals do overlap, but sometimes they don't. The line between skepticism and conspiracy thinking isn't a wall, it's a spectrum. Under the right circumstances, anybody can move along it. The challenge isn't to stop asking difficult questions. It's to become comfortable with the possibility that some questions don't have simple answers, because the world is often more complicated than a conspiracy. And sometimes it's just as simple as a coincidence. History is shaped with accidents, coincidence, and yes, sometimes genuine conspiracies. Learning to tell the difference is one of the hardest intellectual skills we have to develop. It requires curiosity without certainty, skepticism without cynicism, and most importantly, the humility to admit that sometimes the answer is also the least satisfying one. I don't know. What about you? How do you relate to this? Do you find that you err towards believing conspiracy theories? If you're somebody who rejects them, I hope this has made you more understanding of those around you that do believe it. Let me know in the comments what you think. Thank you very much for watching.